This week on Casual Watch Talk podcast, we talk about our watch obsessions and we go into our watch regrets. What watches do we regret buying? What watches do we regret selling? And tips so that you don't end up regretting your watch purchases. Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Talk podcast. Should be an interesting show this week. Todd, how have you been?
I've been fantastic, just sort of navigating the new world we're in, but having a good time.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's been a crazy news week and everything, hasn't it? So
that's for sure.
We'll see how that goes. But the main subject today, we're going to be talking about, I stole this topic off Watch Crunch, actually. Watch Crunch had a great thread that a lot of people contributed to. I think probably over 100 people about watch regrets. So we'll cover that for our main topic. But let's kick it off as we always do with a wristwatch check, and I'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, today I broke out the Casio G-Shock, the Square. Well, you have to help me. A GW, it's 5600, yeah, but I can't remember the actual 5610 that has the solar, which is fantastic. So I don't ever worry about the battery, and the atomic clock, although I have never been able to make that sync. I've had it in the window since I've had it. I must be in a bad area for it, but what a great watch. And it's got that really cool screw-on case back that very solid. This is one, like I was saying before, until that solar module goes, this is just a permanent watch. This is always a go-to. I travel with it. This is the one that you can rely on all the time.
Have you tried that app?
Oh, yeah. It's actually cool. The app is really cool. I have it on a couple of the watches. The other one I bought from you and this one, and it is a very cool way to work with, interact with your watch. It's very close to Apple Watch world, but not as efficient. But at the same time, it's kind of cool to be able to deal with it through the app.
Yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know, I made an upload on the channel about this, but I don't know how they did this. It seems like it's magic, but somebody invented an app that essentially it kind of pulsates. You can hear it ticking, but somehow it simulates the mast. It simulates the atomic mast. And the watch understands this frequency that comes out of your phone's speaker, and it sets itself based on the nearest atomic mast, which for us is in Fort Collins in Denver. In fact, even though that's several states away, I think that's still the only one in the US.
Which could be a problem here in Northeast Ohio. So that's a bit of a stretch.
Bit of a stretch, yeah. But the app really does work. Where I use it to set when somebody sends me, like Citizen often send me watches that have that atomic timekeeping. But it definitely does work. So if you struggle, I know a lot of people are like, oh, tie it around a wardrobe, a metal wardrobe pole and do it, or tie it to like a fence outside, so it acts as a range extender. But this app, I think this app I've never had it not work, and I think it's free. It's called, I think they're Japanese, so it registers itself to a Japanese mast, and the one that I use is called Radio Wave Sync, and it's on the iOS store. Not affiliated, but it is a good app. So if you have a problem with that, because some watches, I had a Citizen field watch, and it was next to impossible to set it manually because the whole watch was designed to set itself off the atomic mast, and that was and sometimes it's a lot easier to do that. Okay, well, my wristwatch check is I'm wearing I released an upload on it on the channel, and I am wearing my Ironman Triathlon, my 8-lap, which is the recreation of my childhood watch from 1986. I managed to get it from Japan.
It's a cool piece. Very cool.
Yeah, I'm forcing myself to wear it because otherwise it would just sit in its box, but I do like it. They bought out some metal ones. I was chatting to Russell, Mad Watch Collector, and he's getting one of the metal ones. I wish the metal ones were slightly bigger, but they've kept the proportions, which is about 38 mil. So I'm going to watch his review of it, because the price doesn't necessarily put me off of $325 US, but the size might put me off. Although, who knows? It's
one of those, when you're in the digital watch world, it's very comfortable. It's one of those ones you almost forget you have on. Now, I don't know how the metal one will weigh, but it is one of the fun things about Timex and G-Shocks of that era, that you can wear them and they melt into your wrist.
Yeah, absolutely. So next up, we'll do our watch obsessions. Again, I'll let you go first. What's been your watch obsession?
This again, what's funny is my son has become my field operative, but because he is constantly looking at watches now. I've polluted both of them, and I didn't know this one came out either. And it's the new Seiko Prospex Alpinist GMT SPB 493J. It's a limited edition, of course it is, because Seiko. It's the new version of the Alpinist, but with the GMT movement, and it's in the dials. It's inspired by the hornbill, an Asian bird, a tropical bird of Southeast Asia. But I'm not really concerned about the hornbill. It is a great color combination, black dial with this sort of grain on it, a nice green for the compass, which I could give or take with the Alpinist. Because I'm never using that compass feature, and then an outer bezel that's painted black, and then with the gold hands and indices, just a very good looking watch. This is an all-rounder that you could wear in the office, you know, with a suit, and wear it on the weekend. I mean, it's a very good looking watch.
Definitely looks like an evolution of the Alpinist, doesn't it? It's got the 6R54, which I don't think I haven't had a watch that's got that movement in it, so I don't know what the variance is. I thought you were joking about limited edition, because usually Seiko, it's like, oh, limited edition to 15,000, but this for them is very limited, isn't it? 500.
Yeah, that's unusual. But I mean, it seems like everything's a limited edition. So you see the headline and you're like, okay, well, another limited edition.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one's pretty tight for them.
Yeah, no, it looks really good. I don't know if I have a watch obsession. We've been looking at the devil on my shoulder. We've been looking at new cars. We have a Hyundai Tucson, which has been awesome. Like, it's 3 years old, but I've always had or always loved minis, and I've had a couple, and I sold mine when I moved to Florida because it was 10 years old, and it was becoming, unfortunately, as maybe mini owners know, we have like older BMW minis that some of them become a money pit eventually, and this was becoming a money pit, and it broke down a couple of times, so we swapped it. But we've been looking at the new Mini, and I know it's going to be fun, and I know it's really going to be good, great to drive. I love the way it drives, but also we've got a paid off car. I don't know whether I should get into a lease. It's like that. I suppose we have it with watches as well, don't we? It's like, oh, I can afford it, but should I?
Yes. That is always the question, especially with watches. And, you know, it's like, once you have that paid off car, it's nice to have a few months of taking the car payment and stashing that aside, you know, and not think about that car payment. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we're doing this. We're doing the, the couples maths or whatever it is, where we're basically trying to justify things that really don't make a lot of sense. Like, we're thinking, well, what if the Hyundai starts, you know, it's the end of its warranty, and if we start having to pay, but I mean, even if we had to replace the engine on it, it still wouldn't be the delta between what the Hyundai's worth and what the new Mini's worth. But I don't like the new Mini Cooper and the Mini Cooper S. They've made them a little bit more rounded off than the style that I like, but the John Cooper Works one is spectacular looking. We'll have to see how it goes. But yeah, so I've been obsessing about that mostly this week. There's been no room for watches.
You'll have to keep us updated as you progress, and we'll see how this impacts the watch journey this year.
Well, yeah. Well, so far I've been holding strong. I haven't bought a new watch, not even one for review, which I compartmentalize in my head as not being actually watch purchases, because I'm buying them to do a review, and then I give them away. I just gave away a bunch to TJ, actually, good friend of the show.
Oh, nice.
But I haven't even bought any of those. But what that means that I haven't been doing a lot of reviews. I've only released the Iron Man review recently. I've got some good stuff coming in, though. I've got another one from Phoebus, which I know you're also a fan of Phoebus watches.
Big fan. They're one of those, like, if you know brands. The people who love them are very passionate about them, and I'm on a Facebook group for Phoebus owners, and not that you're trying to flip them, but like we talked about it, you can pretty much sell it for what you paid for and not take a bath on it amongst the people who love them, and they are really nice watches.
Yeah, this is a new one. I don't know how I could talk about it. It might be I think it's under embargo, but it's a new one. It's one of their existing models that they're going to be doing in bronze, so that this will be interesting. I've got a couple coming from Citizen, a couple coming in from Citizen, two new sort of 2025 models. One that is very 90s. It's two-tone with a green dial, so it's very Wall Street in my mind. And then there's another, like the Navi Hawk. They've made a reduced size, so they made a multi-mil Navi Hawk. So they're going to be loaning. We're going to be loaning one of those. Hopefully loaning both of those in for the channel, and then I'll also be chasing up Casio. But I got an interesting, not a new watch, but I posted this on Watch Crunch. I got a G-Shock rug, an area rug, that's a G-Shock 5600. I didn't believe it was real. I didn't believe it was on the Casio Points program, which I think I'm learning now is only maybe in America, because I've been chatting to a couple of people in the UK and they're like, no, there's no Casio Points program. And I think they're shutting it down because there's less and less and less on there. But essentially, if you bought a G-Shock, you got X number of points for it. It didn't correlate to the price really. But one of the things on there was a rug for 200 points, and 200 points is nothing. There's a pack of G-Shock stickers which I also got, which was 70 points. But if you wanted a cap, like just a ball cap, that's 400 points. And then a hoodie is like in the thousands of points. 200 points for a rug. And they had a picture of it, and it does look like a rug. But I ordered it, and I've got to say, very impressed with it. It is actually a padded rug. I don't know how long it'll last, but it looks good in the studio for the time being. Maybe I'll use it for a giveaway. But
how big is it?
It's probably...
What's the lug to lug on that thing?
Well, this is what I was joking on Watch Crunch. I was joking on Watch Crunch about it, saying that always check the size of a G-Shock when you're ordering it because some are bigger.
Right.
I would say it's probably 4 foot by... 4 foot-ish by 3 foot. So you'd get an office chair on it. Those rugs that you would put an office chair on, essentially.
That's a pretty good size carpet rug for the 200 points as compared to the hat and the hoodie is what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really quirky. And I did have a little sneaky look on eBay, and there is somebody selling one $200. If that sells, I might put mine on for $200. But yeah, it's a quirky nonetheless. I put it on my wife's side of the bed when she was at work. When she came back, because she can see the Ring camera, so she catches me out all the time because the Ring camera pings her. She's like, "Oh, what was that package at the back door?" So I came home, I put it next to her bed. She was but it was quite funny.
That's a dangerous thing. My wife does the same thing. She's got an eagle eye on that Ring camera when the packages arrive.
I know we put them in because we're like, oh, we're going to be, we're man of the house. We're protecting our castle, and little did we know we got out.
The whole thing with the porch pirates though does make me nervous. So that was the primary reason, because I occasionally buy. So I do video, and so I buy sometimes expensive equipment. I don't like it sitting out there for very long. I want to know when it hits and run out there and grab it.
Yeah, luckily I'm in a more of a gated community, so we don't have a lot of that. But that's why I got a Ring camera as well. Okay, well, that was our wristwatch check and our watch obsessions, and we did ask for comments to be sent in, and we would read them out, and we are staying true to our word. So we got a comment from longtime channel member of the YouTube channel, and he's been subscribed to the channel for years and years and years. So this is Eric, where he goes by Cedar Canoe on, if you've seen him in the comments or on the live streams, from Sweden. And he messages in, he says, "Hi Sam, some feedback and a possible tip for a topic in the next panel discussion. Recently on the podcast regarding falling or not Rolex prices, which was our last show, Todd mentioned not having any trust in vintage watches. I can't agree to that. I own some 50 watches and 42 of them are vintage, 23 handers and 22 chronographs from the 1950s, 60s, 70s era from Switzerland and Japan. Every single one of them is running fine, still looks mint for the majority of them, and honestly I haven't had one problem apart from the standard checkups by a local watchmaker after I bought them and maintenance when needed, which isn't more often as on modern watches. I do mostly Omegas and watches that have Valjoux movements. I certainly feel we need to discuss this and hopefully debunk Todd's expressions in the next video." So what I did was, I think I'll definitely let you have a right to reply, but I actually invited Eric on. Unfortunately, he's not able to come on for a couple of weeks, but I did invite him on. But that's our first comment. So Todd.
So I can totally see where he's coming from, and I will say this. I believe those watches are built to last. They were working in a different paradigm back in the 1950s and 60s, where watches were intended to just last a lifetime, and people didn't have to think about them. All of that I can understand and be true. And I think where I'm coming from on mine is I don't like the acrylic crystal, if you can, the acrylic, glass on it. And I also the water resistance is my biggest thing. I don't want to think about when I'm doing some dishes or when I'm doing a little bit of work, I splashed water on it and it's going to destroy the watch. Those are my primary concerns. I wasn't really worried about them from a functional standpoint, and he is correct there. Now, I'm impressed with the chronographs he's talking about, because that just goes back to what I said about just mechanical chronographs in general. That's an expensive maintenance issue when the time comes. But I would agree. I have a couple of vintage pieces that you can wind them up and they work probably as good as they did 20, 30 years ago. I am more of a, I'm a gotta watch guy. So I like to put it on and not think about it all day long. And I can't do that with a vintage watch. So that's where I was coming from on that. Kudos to you. That sounds like an awesome collection. I'd love to see it someday. I'm more worried about damaging it than I am that it's not going to work. I think maybe there was a misunderstanding there. I didn't speak correctly on that.
We're very similar minds about this. I don't have a lot of vintage watches other than perhaps the ones I inherited, but I don't necessarily pursue vintage watches. Some vintage digital watches I do like because that's from my childhood.
Sure.
There's Casios from the 80s, which there were some really cool ones, and we're doing all sorts of crazy stuff, which they don't often do now. But I actually agree with you, but I think he makes a good point, and I've heard this quite a lot, and you hear this going back to cars, you hear this sort of a lot of vintage car guys, don't you, where they say either you need to learn to maintain it yourself or you need a really good mechanic that can help you keep it going. And I think that's the same with watches, isn't it? You hear that quite a lot, that a lot of vintage people, Seiko Todd, for example, he has a network of skilled watchmakers that when they do buy watches, they can get it serviced and stuff like that. Because it was funny, I was chatting to a colleague and he sent me a picture of a Seiko 6139. And he said, oh, somebody at work's selling this. Do you want to buy it? And I was like, well, how much are they asking? And it was high. He looked on Chrono and it's high. And he says, what? He said, well, he wants to keep the price the same, but he says he'll get it serviced. And I replied to him and I said, you might not know this, but for those Seikos, there might only be a handful of people in the US that can actually service that. You can't just take it to a watch, or at least that can get hold of the parts. I mean, there might be a watchmaker who can take it apart and oil it, but they're specialist watches, so maybe that's what. But luckily, Eric's going to come on the channel, so we'll be able to find out, which I think will be fascinating for us to learn, but also the live stream audience as well.
Well, yeah, and you just make a very good point. So I have a very good watchmaker that I have, but he's getting older, and so that makes me nervous that, eventually he's going to retire. And when I took my Omega to him, he actually had to, it was only a 90s Omega Speedmaster reduced. He had to reach out to his contacts in the Middle East who have a very large vault and was able to source the parts from the Middle East. His brother still lives over there just to be able to repair my watch. And there are times too where I've heard him talk about he has to actually in shop make parts, which blows my mind, that he has the capacity to do that in his little shop. That's where things get a little dodgy. So that's, a concern. But, again, the watches, as they built them, I had a couple Seamasters, like they're wonderful. They're simple. There's not a ton going on in there, except for those chronographs. Again, I'd love to see what he's got there. They should last a long time the way they're built.
Funny, when I had my Speedmaster, I had to take it to be serviced at a local jeweler, and in between me taking it there and me getting it back, this must have been 2009, 2010-ish, so a fair old while ago. He had his certificate from an Omega authorized service technician certificate, and then the next time I went in, they were down. I was like, oh, what's going on? He said, yeah, Omega's actually bringing a lot of that back in-house. They're not providing parts to independents. Now, I don't know if that is still the case. I think it probably might be. I think that's also a shame, because those watchmakers years ago could get, I guess, parts for almost anything, and now they're bringing that in-house. I used to work for a company where I was selling Apple Macs. It wasn't an Apple store, it was an independent place, and we had a service center. And even then, this was early 2000s, even then Apple were doing very much the same thing, where you couldn't get the part if you weren't an authorized service center. And they even, by the time I left, you were even having to send a part to get a part. You having to commit to, hey, I'll send you this motherboard back or logic board back, but you had to commit to sending it, so you had to send the broken part back, essentially. So I think a lot of these companies are trying to bring in-house, but also the European, not in so much in America, but certainly in Europe, they're doing a lot of work around that right to repair and things like that, where you should make parts available. And it was the European Union that forced Apple to do the USB-C chargers and things like that. So
that brings up another thing too. What's interesting is when you have to send it back to the factory, and I don't know if this is true, I've been told, and we were warned it, and I was happy that my dad was able to take his 70s Speedmaster to our local jeweler, because my understanding is if you actually had to send that back to Omega, they would change the dial out too, because of the radium on the indices, and we didn't want to, didn't want to lose that vintage style that he's had since 1970, whatever.
Yeah. Because they say you have to put, I don't know whether Omega do it, but remember watching Paul Thorpe when he was doing watch stuff and not his current stuff, but he said that you can put down you want a historically sympathetic restoration. I think he was talking about Rolex at the time. But yeah, when I took my Speedmaster to be serviced, they replaced the hands.
Oh yeah.
Because their goal with servicing, isn't it? I guess with most companies is not to preserve the patina of a watch. It's to replace anything that's broken and make it basically a new watch again. They aren't restoring it.
Well, which is a funny thing too, that it's such a sin in the watch community. But if I had a 1972 Mustang that was patinaed, I'd have a difficult time selling that. People want that to look pretty and shiny and new again, and regardless of what's happening underneath the paint. It's a really funny juxtaposition between the cars and the watches.
Yeah, if you could have the engine parts replaced with exact replicas of the part but new. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for the message, Eric, and keep them coming. Either you can DM us on Instagram, or you can DM me on Watch Crunch, or email in the casualwatchreviewer@gmail.com, or leave a comment underneath this on YouTube or on Spotify as well. I'll see those comments. Keep them coming. We love hearing from you.
For sure.
Okay, let's dive into the main topic of today's show, which I stole off McBeardy, I think it's pronounced, Brad of Watch Crunch. He posed the question on Watch Crunch, what are your watch regrets? And it did garner some very interesting comments, I thought. A few people said that, hey, well, we can discuss both of these and then we'll go over our Watch Crunch, but we'll go over our picks for watch regrets. But two things I found interesting about it was that some people are very much any watch over X price for me is a regret, because if I buy it, I end up regretting spending so much. So that was one thing. The other one was that some commenters were leaning towards that they meticulously obsess over a watch that much that by the time they buy it, they don't regret it because they know what they've got. Another group of people, which I think is also, I fall into this, where you love the chase of the watch, you love the chase, but when you actually get it, if there's something slightly off with it, or maybe you don't even know, you just don't warm to it, you don't resonate to it. And then the fourth one, which I thought was interesting, and I've definitely done this, and I think majority of watch collectors do this, is when you're first starting out, or when you're just looking around in the sales and stuff, you end up seeing a really cool, affordable watch, and then you impulse buy it, and then when you get it, you're like, oh yeah, it's cool, but then you never really end up wearing it, and it's because you've got this lust for, you're either saving for a bigger watch, but you need to kind of satiate your appetite, or you just impulse buy them. But that was four big ones there, Todd. I don't know if I should go over them again, if you remember what I said.
Bits and pieces. For the first one that's just called buyer's remorse, and eventually that'll either pass or you'll move on the watch. The last one you were talking about, that is a challenge, I think, for a lot of guys in this hobby, is that affordable grab. And I've had a number of those where I've bought them and then like, oh, I don't really love the watch, and then I end up trying to resell it and end up probably taking a loss every single time. There's not a flipping happening on the affordable watch market. And so that I have learned to pull that back. I've gotten to where I look at it and I go, okay, I'm going to make this purchase. Am I actually going to wear it, or is it going to sit in my watch box? And I've been able to rein that one in. The buy and then not fall in love with happened to me really only one time, and unfortunately it was with one of my favorite brands. The one that I'm thinking of is a Christopher Ward, for a while, had this black and yellow world timer that I thought looked really good.
I reviewed it.
And very handsome watch. All the pictures look beautiful. And I thank goodness for that what is that 60/60 guarantee they've got, or warranty. I got it, and it just didn't do anything. When I had it on my wrist, I just didn't love it like I did the other Christopher Wards that I have. It just sort of, I don't know why it didn't settle with me. But it was one of those, and that's one of the things that is the challenge of a online only retailer. Like you won't know till you have it in hand.
This is a little confession, scenes that we joke that we're a stealth front for Christopher Ward talk, because we are huge fans of the brand. But I wasn't excited about that period of time when they had this watch fell into, to me, those watches, were they called retro diver or vintage diver, the section that they had?
Yeah, I think they were based off, they called it the C65. So it was like a bigger retro diver. And I had one of those and I loved it. I moved it on only because it didn't have a screw down crown. Why? Silly. But it was a thing. And but I liked the look of the diver. And so I thought I was going to love this GMT.
I also bought one of those divers. I bought the blue one. But when I got it, to me, I like bigger watches, but it looked out of proportion on my wrist. It looked like a dinner plate almost, because it was sort of round and flat. I liked that world timer that they had, and it was amazing how thin they got the bezel on that, and it still was,
yeah,
it was like magic, because it was still thin, but it didn't feel flimsy or cheap. I think it was to mimic it wasn't plastic, but I think it was to mimic the plastic bezels that you used to get on world timers back in the day, like on the Walbrook or Douglas watches, and there was a few others that had plastic bezels. It had a gloss that made it look like one of those, but I reviewed that one, but I did buy one of the divers, and that's the only Christopher Ward that I ever bought that I didn't like, and I also sent it back on that 60/60 deal.
Warranty.
Yeah, which they do. I mean, they're very good about it. They do honor that.
Yeah. And the other thing about it, and it's probably the illusion, their light catcher case is really a dream. And on normal watch, it makes it look very thin. On those watches, they looked really thin on the wrist. It was really a cool look, but that may have led to sort of that dinner plate feel that you're talking about, because it lays so flat and then just pretty prominent on the wrist. It may have given you that sort of illusion that this thing's huge, but you know, it's a cool, they were very cool. I loved other things in their lineup way more.
I think when they they were on my radar. They sent the world timer, I think might have been the first one they ever sent me that I reviewed, but I really got into reviewing them when the Sealander, when that version of the light catcher case came out, because I think that was a turning point in certainly my view on Christopher Ward, because that light catcher case is absolutely phenomenal. Like the way that it's balanced, the way that it fits, and it sounds like a simple thing, but as I'm more and more watches that I review, and we'll get onto one of the watch regrets, I think the cases are actually a lot harder to get right than you first think when you're getting into watches. Oh, of course a watch is going to be comfortable. Of course a watch is going to fit. Maybe the size might be off. You soon learn after a period of time. Sometimes the crown might dig into your hand, or the way that the sharp edges on a case and things like that. Whereas I think the light catcher case by Christopher Ward is by far one of the best all-rounders.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it's one of those ones. And it's one of those things you don't really think about when you first start collecting watches. You know, you're so focused on the dial and maybe the feature set. But as you start to really begin to appreciate watches, those cases and even the bracelets become very important. Something that I didn't think about in the 80s, you know, or 90s. You know, you'd get a watch, it was like, oh, that's what it is. There's been a marked shift in the other parts of the watch, because even it wasn't that long ago, even on a Rolex, you just get a stamped clasp.
Yes.
Right. That was like basic stuff, but it has changed in the last 2 decades maybe. And now it's like, this is a serious consideration of the watch. I mean, Seiko is still making 80s and 90s bracelets on their watches, but everybody else has kind of changed their game.
Well, I reviewed a $200,000 Paul Newman, vintage Rolex Paul Newman Daytona that Bob's Watches had in a vault. They had to get it out of the vault for me. And you're right, the bracelet on that, it felt like it was just going to fall to bits in your hand. They had the press clasp. They felt fragile. Obviously they weren't fragile, but they felt almost like the Seiko ones that you would get on the SKXs, the jangly ones.
Oh, for sure. The janglies, they were all jangly then.
Yeah. What do you think about so we've talked about the regret of the impulse purchase. I've definitely had many of those. And also, I also have learned, but it took quite a while to curb my impulses on these things. And also, I mean, I do a bit of reviewer maths in my head where I be like, oh, well, I'll review it and then I might move it on or give it away or whatever. But really, it probably doesn't equate. I'm still probably financially in a deficit on it. I'm talking, sub $200 ones,
right?
Because there's some cracking ones when you get to 300 and so on. But yeah, I think that's been great. The one about I don't get the price. I wouldn't regret buying a watch because it was expensive. And I don't hold on. If I've got an expensive watch, I don't hold, and I don't like it, I don't hold on to them. I will sell them on, and like you say, you usually take a bath, but also you have to kind of weigh up that with how long you've worn it and stuff like that. So I don't keep expensive watches if I don't wear them, but I've never had a regret about spending X amount on a watch, because usually I think those ones are the ones that you consider the most. They're the most considered purchase.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, what you're getting into before you got into it. Like, this must be, or it's someone who has a huge amount of disposable income and has bought a $10,000 watch. Like, oh, I probably shouldn't have bought that. Now, maybe they're having the same thought as I'm having about a $300 watch. I don't know what their backstory is.
Yeah, the regret would definitely come from and I've never done this, and nobody should do this, but buying a watch on finance or buying a watch with money it's got to be they used to call it the FU money, didn't it? It's got to be that money that once you paid your bills, once you've done your investments, the surplus, or perhaps sold a few watches and you've got a surplus and it doesn't financially impact you. And also, I guess you just have to be an educated buyer. And like the Grand Seikos, which are my biggest regrets buying, I think I was silly because even though I bought one pre-owned, I still took a bath on it when I sold it 3 weeks later, but we'll probably get to that. So I haven't really experienced this was very expensive. I've definitely experienced where I've really, really lusted after a watch. One was actually a Squale, and I bought into the hype on it big time. It was the Atmos 50 or something, and I really bought into it. And then when it arrived, it was so top heavy, which is actually, that bothers me more than a heavy watch, is when it's top heavy, which put me off that Seiko spring drive DMT. When it pulls down on my wrist from the crystal, not only does it bother me because I don't like the sensation of it, but it also, when you know that a big cased watch can feel comfortable, a watch that's bigger than that and a watch with sapphire can feel well balanced. Seiko is a classic example of this. Oh, why couldn't they have balanced this a little bit better?
Yeah, no, that's something that's, I think, more specifically to you. I mean, I don't really mind that sensation. When I was younger, I kind of always wore my watches like my father does now, like kind of like a bracelet. If it slid around a little bit, it didn't really bother me. In fact, and it may be just the nature of my skin. I have kind of a little bit more of an oily skin. So I hate when a watch sits tight and it's like sticking to my wrist. That makes me crazy. So a little bit of flop doesn't bother me, but I do know what you mean if it starts to dig into or hurt, the bone structure of your wrist or the back of your hand. That's very different. I'm not a fan of that.
My skin is very dry. So it does, I do feel it pressing on the back of, I do feel crowns. But also, to your point, one of the many things that come from collecting watches, isn't it, that you learn that it's almost you wish you didn't know. For example, what a watch's movement is worth when it's not cased in the watch.
Oh, yeah.
If I didn't know that, then I would be fine paying $5,000 for whatever, a Solita movement. But the other thing is that the more you learn about watches and the more watches you see and the more watches you handle and stuff, it's the tiny things that you really start to obsess over, I think, or you start to recognize. And mine definitely has become wearability of watches. And even if it's slightly off, I know from when I first started out watch collecting, I would convince myself that the things that bothered me about a watch when I first, I'd be like, oh, I'll just get used to it. Like a new pair of shoes, or wear them, whatever. But for me, that, if anything, it only gets worse. The Black Bay 58 is an absolute prime example of this. In another conversation we were having, Watch Crunch, that somebody said that one of their watch regrets was a Black Bay 50, and I totally agree with you, because I bought it thinking, okay, well, yeah, I can have a watch without the date on it, like I'll like it without the date, I'll just get used to it not having the date, but I just couldn't warm to it at all.
That fixation for you it's wild to me that bothers you so much that just not having a date function will put you off of a watch. Whereas I've gotten to where I actually like not having a date at times. My everyday watches sometimes don't have date because I don't have to think about it when the end of the month turns around. I don't have to think about it at all. I kind of like that. Just tell me the time. That's all I need. But I get it. Everybody has a different, what is important to them on their watch. I've had a few watch regrets in my collecting journey that I can tell you, that where you're looking at it and you go, okay, I have this number of watches in my collection. I want to get this other one. I'm probably not going to wear that one very much if I sell it. And then I trade it, get the watch, and then I start going back like, oh, I wish I still had that watch in my collection. And that's a tough one for me. Like there's a couple that I've been chasing and the prices have gone up on them. And then it just is irritating because I know what I paid for it when I first bought it. And now getting a hold of it, especially one in particular is a tag. And I've mentioned it before on the channel, but two things have happened since then. I bought it sort of at the tail end of when everybody still hated tag, and I got a nice tag Aqua Racer chronograph. No, Formula One chronograph. Beautiful watch, nice bracelet. I got it for $600 off of eBay. There's the quartz movement, so obviously there's that. But in the last few years, Tag has made a really good shift. I mean, their newer models are getting them more attention. And now that they're at the forefront of Formula One, that same watch is, when I try to go find it again, it's doubled, tripled what I paid for it. And I'm kind of kicking myself for, I really like it, but I'm not paying. It's one of those, like, once I know that I paid $600 for it, I'm not paying $1,800 for that watch. You're crazy. But I really want that one back in my collection. So I'm keeping an eye out for that one in particular. And then there was a Zelos that I really liked. It was a little small, so I didn't fall in love with it, but it had a sandwich dial. It was sort of this sandblasted titanium kind of color. And it was I can't remember if it wasn't called the Dune, but it was something like that. Really cool watch. I got rid of it. And Zelos is another one like Phoebus. The people who love that brand, there's no sacrificing price on those. You're paying full price. And I haven't seen that model pop up anywhere, but boy, that was a cool watch. And it's another one where I'm just like, ugh, I wish I still had that in my box. I'd pull that out every once in a while.
Interesting you made the point about when buying a watch, selling a watch and then trying to buy it back. So I think I'm probably famous for this, or infamous for selling my Speedmaster that I had for 10 years. And I don't regret selling it. I would own another Speedmaster, but I just cannot get my head around the prices now. I sold mine for, I was looking the other day actually, it was like $3,250, and I bought it for probably the equivalent of about $1,800 10 years before. So it made a little bit of money. And I think that $3,500, I would probably buy one back at that. Well, one of the ones that's got the date on it, because mine didn't have the date on it, but yeah.
Sure, the date's worth that extra $1,800.
Yeah, I find it funny that, like, I wouldn't buy an Omega new. I've almost just in my head now decided, hey, it's not, I would like another Speedmaster, but I would never buy one. It's not just probably not going to happen, because I owned one for so long and I loved it. And I know they're so cool, but I can't fathom in my head buying one. Even the pre-owned ones are in the 5,000 or 6,000 now, and no, maybe that's not right. The professional is sort of around 5,000 or 6,000, I think, on Omega. But even at 4,000 or whatever, and I certainly think it's absolutely insane that some of them are like 8,000, 9,000 now new. I just cannot fathom it together. So I've just sort of compartmentalized in my head that I probably won't own a mechanical Speedmaster ever again, unless I saw one for a really good deal. But I probably won't own the one that I had again, and I'm fine with that. I did buy another Speedmaster. Well, it was the X33, the original one, the original NASA, the one they made for the astronauts. And that was probably a bit of a watch regret, because I'd looked at them for ages and I always wanted them. And it was a bit of an impulse purchase in the fact that I saw it in a watch store, which, what are the chances of that, finding one in an actual watch store? And I did overpay for it, to be honest, but just the thrill of having it there. And actually I went through that where part of the alarm was broken, and apparently that is a common fault with those first gen ones. And we waited 8 weeks for the part to come through, but they did replace it. They did honor it, the store that I got it from. But again, I got that and the reality of living with it. What was funny is it has that circular LCD. This was the first gen one. The Skywalker ones now have a dark, but the hands are white, and the contrast between basically a silvery champagne-y LCD and white hands was kind of what put me off it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, no, those are definitely cool watches. That's one I kind of have had sort of in the background, but yeah, you're right. For where I'm at, the pricing's just, it's not in the cards.
No. And it's not that I think, because I bought Rolexes that were higher than the 9,000 or whatever that even the newer Speedmasters are. But I don't think it's worth it for me I don't think they're worth it for me. I think now Omega is building them to a price, not for accessibility to more people, and I don't like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's something that's been talked about. I think we even talked about this during our Rolex conversation. That they are seem to be shooting at a price. You know, you're going like, well, what changed? And it doesn't seem like much else changed other than the price.
Yeah, it is wild.
And that's, you know, I mean, Rolex is doing the same thing again. But you know, as we talked about before, you can go like, oh, it's crazy to spend this much, but then you go, but have I really spent it, or am I just holding that money in a different place for now?
Exactly.
You know, like
that's what would the appeal to having those Rolexes for me, and I did enjoy that date. Just I really liked it, and I would buy it. Would I buy another one? Well, anyway, yeah, exactly. The Rolex is a store of value where there's not much other watches that you can really say that from.
Yeah. That's they're a unique prospect among the other watches.
What is the biggest regret of a watch that you've ever got, or one that perhaps maybe that's not been maybe we'll do both. What was your biggest surprise of a watch that you bought that was much better than you thought it was going to be, and what was your regret?
The biggest surprise, oh gosh, that's a really good question. I'm going to say the Tudor Black Bay 36. You know, I didn't think initially that I'd be that excited about a watch that small, but boy, once I had that watch, that was I just wore that with me everywhere. And it became something that was like, I love this watch, and it kind of killed my collection. Now, in the interim, my wife now wears that watch, and I got the 41, but that surprised me because the 36 in that does not feel like a 36. I don't have small wrists. I'm about a 7¼ inch wrist, and it didn't ever feel small on my wrist, and I just really enjoyed that watch way more. The problem is like I have the Black Bay 41 Heritage, and I almost never wear it just because I like that other watch design so much better. That was a real surprise to me. I thought it was going to be a rotational watch as opposed to this just took over everything.
Yeah, well, and then can you think of a regret that you've had?
I think the only regret is the one I just talked about is selling that tag. That is my biggest regret right now. When I look through my collection, it's just, I shouldn't have sold that. I should have kept that watch.
Yeah, I think my biggest surprise was definitely that Braemont. I think I managed to get what I thought was a good deal on it, and I think it was still a good deal, even though Hodinkee ended up fire sailing them for a couple of $100 less than what I paid for it. But I did haggle hard on a cruise ship and got it, and that's been the biggest surprise because I've given Braemont so much stick over the years. I think deservedly. Really surprised me how much I like it, and even though there's a lot of little flaws with it, like the loom is awful, the bracelet's ridiculous on it, ridiculous size, and then there's like dust under the crystal, but I just really warm to it. I like the fact that it's English and it just wears really well, even though it's smaller than what I think I would normally wear, but it just fits me perfectly. And then I would say my biggest regret, too, the Squale that I mentioned, the 50 Atmos didn't wear well. And then the one that is the biggest regret, and it's partly my own fault, was that Grand Seiko GMT spring drive. It looks, in the photos, it looks absolutely spectacular. It's green dial, green ceramic bezel. It's the sweep of the spring drive seconds hand is mesmerizing. It almost floats as it's going round. It's absolutely everything about it was everything it seemed to me like this was the top of the hill in watch collecting of everything that ticks my box. The green color, the ceramic bezel, the spring drive. I always wanted a spring drive, but boy, when I got it, it just didn't wear well at all. It very pulled down from the crystal. The bracelet just seemed a shame that it was the way it was. It was a little bit slab-sided, and yeah, I tried to swap. I made a mistake because I could have returned it back to the guy, but I changed the strap on it, and in doing so, I did mark the back of the lug, and I did tell him, because I asked if I could return it. It's like, is there any damage? And I said, look, to be honest, I have actually scratched so I'm happy to take it. And he was like, he was a dealer, and he'd got it on consignment from a customer, and he went back to the customer, and the customer was like, no. I think I know why, because the customer was probably just happy to get rid of it, and also I did overpay for it. So I ended up, but it was one of those things where I was toying up, okay, I'm going to put it on Chrono 24 for basically what I paid for it, so I would have just took a bath on the fees a little bit, but I did take a lower offer for it, because I did the whole thing in my head of, even though I'm going to lose money on this watch, it's emotionally bothering me that much that what cost would I put on? And sometimes I do think that what irritation is it for me still having this watch that I desperately want to get rid of? Is worth it? And in that case, it was worth it. And luckily, in a weird twist of fate, I made an upload on it just off the cuff, just giving my thoughts, and it's basically gone viral. The vast majority of people are just chiming in to telling me I'm wearing it wrong, or that I don't know what I'm doing, or whatever, I adjusted the bracelet wrong. But the fact that has done so well for the channel in terms of raising the views on that, because that's got nearly 500,000 views, which is insane for my channel. I think it's lifted all of it. I've worked out basically, because you can sort of see the ad revenue, and I've definitely nearly at breaking even on what I lost on the Grand Seiko based on the ad revenue, which is just like one of those cool happy accidents where if I hadn't made that upload, I would have still been in the hole for the money. But a lot of times I don't regret things, because it is, I guess it's a good place to end. But
sure,
it is, I don't know if you found this, but even though you buy watches, you might not like them, and you sell them and stuff, his journey is the destination, isn't it? Or whatever that phrase is.
No, that's 100% true. But you have to keep that in balance, because that journey can lead you down the path, like we talked about, of making bad choices. But the overarching journey is the point. Yeah, you're correct. And that never stops being fun. I've just learned to be better at being vicarious as opposed to having to have it in my collection.
So guys, we're really interested to know what you think on that conversation. Do you have any watch regrets? Let us know in the comment on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app, or on the YouTube channel, either on my main channel, Casual Watch Reviews, or on this podcast specific channel, which is Casual Watch Talk Podcast. We really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk Podcast.
We'll see you soon. Bye.